Welcome to today's episode of The Authentic Man with me, your host, David Chambers. And this is one of my mini episodes, and I suspect it might go over the normal length of a mini episode, but that's fine. I think this is an important topic and a topic that has come into the news, right? This is around incel culture. And I was almost not going to record about this today, but it came up in the news, and I thought, it's important because I have some understanding of this situation, understanding of the culture, not from a personal experience, but from a point of view of quite a few clients over the years I've had have been men who have researched or looked into this culture, who have been maybe sucked into the culture and want to get out of that, and want to get into a more healthy way of relating to women in the world. So I have an understanding of how men find themselves in this way of thinking. So I thought maybe I'll start off by saying, obviously, this if you're reading this in this week, a man called Jake Davison has murdered a number of people in Portsmouth in the UK. This is not the first mass shooting, mass murder that has been linked to men who have kind of related to incel culture, which I'll say in a second. But as in a nutshell, incel culture is around, it's kind of online culture, right? Of men who kind of would define themselves as men who would like a romantic partner, right? Or a sexual partner, but are struggling to find one or be desired by other women. They're usually straight men, straight heterosexual cis men. And they use things like Reddit and various other forums to talk about, incel related ideas, which a lot of around kind of hatred and like a deep hatred and resentment towards women. Often a dislike of human beings and the race of which we're all members of, right? A lot of self-pity, self-loathing. There's a lot of racism as well. Often it's linked with a lot of right-wing kind of conversations and talk. A lot of entitlement around sex, which I think is a really big part of the movement. An endorsement towards violence. But there's also this idea is that being attractive to women is very much based on things like money and looks only, and really based on, things that you can't really change. So, if you're undesirable because you don't make enough money, then, women only want men with money. It's come to this kind of traditional trope that we have. Something that obviously, if you've listened to my podcast before, from my personal experience, I know is not to be true. And yeah, a lot of the culture, it's just a lot of very angry men who are very angry, very resentful of women, of life, of the world, towards themselves even. And they spend a lot of time talking about, loneliness, unhappiness, suicide, and, various things like, prostitution and stuff like that. And I just got a little statistic here, is 8 mass murders, right, resulting in 61 deaths have been committed since 2014 by men who are self-identified as incels, or have noted other incel people around their time of committing their acts, which I think is a really important point, because that kind of borderline puts them in line with basically a terrorist group, right? And I'm going to say this as a black man, because they're white men, they're not going to be classed as a terrorist group, right? Really. Because that's how the world works, right? As simple as that. If these guys were Muslim and they had beards, these incel would be a class terrorist group, and we would have various government action against them. But I'm not here necessarily to demonize them, to be honest. I know what the things that these men have done is wrong, and their ideas I don't agree with, but I'm going to say that I can understand. And I say this because I feel as a coach, and as just someone who's lived enough, I've come to this realization that I can really understand how people come to certain ways of thinking and come to certain ideas about themselves, their lives, because I've dealt with so many people who have very limiting beliefs about themselves. And part of my work is to understand where they're coming from, right? You have to do the work with them to understand, but also to take them on a journey towards what they really want and what they really love. So when it comes to kind of incel men, I've had a few come to me who have seen that this is not a way of being, and I've not had any men who are like deep into this, who are like committing crimes or acts of hatred against women. It's often been men who feel very marginalized. They don't feel that women pay any attention to them. They feel that they're nice men. They feel like they're good guys. They may not be they believe themselves not to be the most attractive or the most intelligent or the most charismatic, but they feel that they have borne the brunt of some very negative experiences from women. And the truth is I can also understand that. I've been in bars and clubs and I've known men to be treated incredibly badly by women. I'll never forget years ago when I used to take men to bars and clubs, that often guys would go over to a woman or a group of women, a nice guy, he'd introduce himself in this nice way, and maybe he wasn't necessarily the most confident man. And I saw women look at men often in absolute disgust, right? Or just completely ignore them, look them up and down and just sneer, or even say things like, how could he even dare think he can come and talk to me? Now, that is actually some men's experience of talking to women. And when you layer that onto the fact that that's their continual experience of talking to women, you can understand why they would grow a hatred and resentment. And I also completely, when I say understand, don't mistake my understanding for agreement, because I think this is something that we struggle with in life sometimes, is to understand people who have different opinions to us. So these men they feel very angry at the world, right? And I think this is a bigger problem that we're having in terms of with men. It's not the work that I do with men, is around actually expressing what we're feeling, right? Expressing our emotions, because if this kind of frustration is not expressed and not let go of, it will turn into anger. Sadness, if not expressed and let go of, will turn into anger and resentment. And those things will turn into, like shame is another one that these men are often feeling as well. And when they're in that sort of mind space, they're very easily susceptible by any group or person who is trying to give them a reason or tell them that it's not their fault, right? And we live in a world now where instead of people wanting to be responsible and go, hey, oh God, women aren't finding me particularly attractive. Okay, maybe there's something I can do about this. That's hard work. Easy work is for someone to come and tell you, it's not your fault, women just expect too much. Or it's not your fault, it's feminists and they've changed the world and you can blame feminists for all your problems, because then I don't have to do anything. I don't have to take responsibility for any change I need to make, right? So this is one of the crux of the problem. And what I'm proposing a lot is to meet this with understanding and compassion, right? This is, when it comes to women's issues, I'm always like, men, you need to understand women's issues, right? Women's problems, what they face in life. But I also, in this case, I'm also saying that we need to spend the time to understand these men. Like, they are struggling, a lot of them, with mental health issues, with feeling marginalized, with feeling like they're not part of society, that society doesn't care about them, that, they are undeserving, right? They are the lowest of the low. And actually, when you feel that way, you're looking for other people who understand you, right? And instead of just looking at these men and going, they're weird and they're bad and they're wrong, is to go, well, I see why they feel this way, but actually let's have some compassion and understanding to say, this isn't actually, I understand this is your experience, right? But can you see there's another experience you could be having, right? Because ultimately, a lot of these guys are having massive amount of unmet desire, right? They desire to be in relationships. They desire to meet someone to love, but they don't know how to. They don't know how to connect in the way that they would like to, because for whatever reason, they have not learned how to do this and they don't believe they can learn. And this is a really important part, right? Is I see with a lot of the men who have read a lot of incel culture who come to me, is that they don't believe they can change. And this is a real big part of incel culture, is to basically tell you that you can't do anything. It's not your fault and everyone else has to change. And that's a big problem in our society in general, right? We live in a society of blame culture. So, I'm going to say, a lot of these men, they're just looking for, someone who understands them, because they feel like society doesn't care about them. They don't understand them, right? And we just need to spend a bit of time and go, okay, cool. There's these men having this experience, right, of feeling completely neglected and rejected, right? Let's see what we can do. How can we help them? How can we talk to these men? How can we reach them so they don't feel that, so they feel they can actually have a conversation and we can start helping them move into a place where they can feel sexually empowered, connected, and so forth. Like, I believe any man can go from being unattractive and undesirable over a matter of maybe a year or 2 years, and can really lift himself up to a point where he can connect with women or men, wherever he decides sex is, in a way that he can be happy and joyful. Because I think it's a personal change that can be made, right? Whether that be, part of that's going to be looks, part of that's going to be personality, part of that's going to be how one expresses one's own heart's desire and joy, moving past mental health issues or deep sadness that needs to be expressed. But I believe that we all have the capacity to change. And if we can also look at these men in that same way, of men with potential, it is the beginnings of helping these men lift themselves out of the situation they're in. But I think a lot of it is about knowing that we also live in a society that is made for these men. They feel really hard done by. And when I say, and I make it point, it's like they feel really hard done by. And I understand. I get it. I understand that they feel this way. I'm not necessarily saying I agree, because I've also seen the experience of hundreds of other men that I've worked with some, few months of training, a year of training, that they completely shift their mindset and way of thinking, because they're creating new data points. They're creating new ways of thinking. They're shifting these limiting beliefs. But what I hear in the incel culture is that these men's limiting beliefs have become truth. There's no kind of idea of like, no, this is not how it is. So yeah, and there's a lot in there. And I think I could do a much longer episode about this, because it's not a culture that, I think this is part of a bigger problem that we're seeing. We see these very right-wing cultures that are emerging, the resurgence of racism, but I think it's become a lot more acceptable. And I think this all ties in together in this bigger picture of, I don't want to be responsible for how my life is or what's not going right in my life. I want to blame other people. And in this, when it comes to incel culture, there's a blaming of women, basically. This idea that men are entitled to sex, which, really isn't the way it is. Sex is something that how could I say? Sex is something that you create with somebody. You create, attraction, you create desire together, which then creates sexual intimacy and, higher forms of sexual intimacy. It's not something that really is, what's it called? It's not a human right. It's not a basic human right. You have to develop yourself in a way to lift yourself out of that. And I think one of the things that a lot of these guys are really expressing is a powerlessness in their life, a real powerlessness. They don't believe they have any power to create change in their life. And that is a very low place to be. And I've worked with people in the past who just don't believe they can change. And it takes a lot of work to get out of that, right? Imagine some of you in some areas of your life, maybe it's your career, maybe it's forming a healthy relationship. You don't believe you can do it. And it takes a lot of work, but it's something that's possible. It's when we give up in our belief that we can change, we become very powerless, and we can fall into the traps of, these sorts of groups as well. And it's worth actually noting I did some reading this morning, there's actually some female incel groups as well, who believe, that they will never meet anybody and so forth. But a lot of what these ideas are based on is very superficial things that create attraction, like I said, like money, good looks and status. And what they're missing out is this idea that I've come to see is, when we can raise our consciousness, raise our level of awareness, raise our level of ability to connect and empathize and feel our emotions, and empathize and feel the emotions of other people, our attractiveness increases, and that has nothing to do with money, status or looks. And what we might find once we start increasing our consciousness and our awareness, is we may start to look better. We may start to look after ourselves better, because we feel ourselves a lot more. We have more awareness of who we are, instead of, placing all the blame on other people. We start to take responsibility, and responsibility is empowering, because when you're responsible, you can do something. You can make a change, whether that's in your life or other people's lives. So there's a little of my thoughts. It's really sad what's happening in the UK, like with this guy Jake. But it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't shock me, because, in these low periods where, with Corona and work and money starts to get low, we get into low places. People get into very low places. But I just say that if there's anyone in your life, if there's men in your life who you think are leaning towards these sorts of ideologies, like, reach out to them, talk to them, ask them how they are. Don't just blame. Don't just a bit like how we were with racists, and I can talk from this place because I did a lot of work last year around talking about racism. Don't just go, hey, you're racist, or hey, you're an incel, you're bad. First, seek to understand. Even as hard as it is, seek to understand why they feel that way. Like I've sat with people who have mildly racist points of view and asked them, like, oh, why do you think that way? What's brought you to that thinking? Create understanding, because if you stand on your high horse and look down and point them and call them names, that doesn't drive them to change. That just drives them deeper into what they're in and distance you from them. Because actually what you need to do is bring them closer so you can create understanding with them, so that, they can see you as a person and from your point of view, and you can see their point of view. And from that place, we create change, because you don't create change from shaming people. I said this online a lot, like shaming people doesn't create transformation in people. What creates transformation is when we feel that people understand us and they have our best interests at heart, and they're trying to actually help us, not just trying to make us look bad and create more shame. So that's a really short, my views on this whole incel culture. I'm not an expert by any stretch of imagination, but I've met men who I wouldn't say are really deep into this, but they've read a lot of the literature, and they find that it relates to their experience of living, and remember, you can never say someone's experience is wrong because it's their experience, maybe they've taken things in a way that you wouldn't take them, but it's still their experience. So, please, share this episode with anyone who you feel may want to listen to this, or, maybe you want to share it on your Instagram and so forth. Or if you're a man listening to this and you really feel that you're deeply undesirable and you can't meet women, then maybe you should consume some more of my podcast, or, contact me for coaching, because this is my area of expertise, bringing men into a place where they feel attractive, they can connect with women more deeply, beyond the money and so forth. I have a lot of women contacting me daily through Instagram and so forth, wanting to meet a man who wants to deeply connect, and when it comes to looks and money, as much as society tells us that that's what's important, a large majority, I say, of women that I interact with, whose minds are more expanded, who are looking for something deeper, they don't care about money and your status. They care about who you are, your level of awareness, and how you want to deeply connect with them. So you can find me on Instagram at @theauthenticman_. I always forget that bit. Or you can find me by email at hello@theauthenticman. But I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again very soon.